Hey everyone, welcome back to the Right Mindset. Today we're talking about something that can be a game changer for your writing career, negotiating contracts with publishers. Now, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the thought of signing a publishing contract, you're not alone. I've been there. The legal jargon, the unfamiliar terms, and the pressure to just get your book out there can make it all feel incredibly daunting. Okay. But with a little knowledge and preparation, you can navigate this process with confidence. So keep in mind that everything I say today is based on what I've learned being in the business. My accountants have taught me. I have a great accountant, trust me. Have a good lawyer, and of course, experts within the field of entertainment and publishing itself. With that said, you should still do your research, so you can fully inform yourself and understand the information so you can make decisions based on the knowledge. Because remember, knowing something is not the same as understanding it. And today, about publishing contracts explained. Okay, so let's talk about it. But I'm going to cover some key. Oh wait, I got to leave this up. We're going to cover some key contract terms like advances, royalties, and subsidiary rights. Okay, so I'll break down what these terms actually mean, why they're important, and how they affect your earnings as an author. We'll also talk about negotiating tips. All right, what you can ask for, what's reasonable, and how to protect your rights. I'll say this right off the bat. Always bring pizza to a negotiation. And then when they say, I'd love you to change these things, say, you know what? Sounds great. I will change those. Or I will look into that actually. I will change. And then don't do it. You don't have to. Mel Brooks has a funny story about that, where they did Blazing Saddles, and the studio exec came out of the pre-showing, because they do audience, and he's like, Mel, you got to take out the farting scene around the fire, you got to take out all the black jokes, you got to do this, you got to take this out, you got to take that out. And Mel Brooks, of course, it's out, and he just was trying in his book, very funny book. He goes, of course, it's gone, don't worry about it, don't worry. And then he never changed it, and then they released it and made a lot of money. And of course they didn't say anything because it made a lot of money. So sometimes you got to trust your instincts. And also, don't get a cat, because the hair, she just drummed up before I started filming. All right. Anyway, hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand some of the terminology. But what is a contract with a publisher? Well, the short answer is a contract with a publisher is a legal agreement between an author and a publishing company that outlines the terms under which the author's work will be published. This contract typically includes details like how much the author will be paid, advances and royalties, who owns the rights to the work, very important, how long the publisher will have those rights, also extremely important, and what responsibilities both parties have, important. Essentially, it defines how the publisher can use your work, how you'll be compensated, and what you can expect from the publishing process. Basically, understanding the key components of this contract is crucial for ensuring you retain control over your creative work and receive fair compensation. I'll say this before we go into more detail. Advances and royalties. Okay, it's important to know what you're getting up front, because obviously you have to pay that back. Royalties is what you get on top of the advance, in the sense of your royalties pay off the advance, and then once the advance is gone, you start getting the royalties as pay. All right. The other thing is owning the rights. You can still retain the rights to your product, so you can do other things. We're going to talk about that as when it comes to subsidiary rights. So you always want to make sure that they do not retain the rights. You retain the rights. And then, of course, how long the publisher will have those rights. So if you are going to allow them to have the rights or partial rights, by the way, you can also break up the rights. They could have the rights to publishing the book, but not the rights to, say, television, or not the rights to audiobooks. You can control that. However, whatever rights they do take, there has to be a time limit on it, and make sure it's responsible. Meaning, don't give them eternity, perpetuity. All right. Let's talk about some key contract terms. So these are just some contract terms that advances. So we just kind of mentioned that a little bit. An advance specifically is the amount of money a publisher pays an author upfront before the book is actually published. It's essentially an advance payment against future royalties. Advances are important because they provide financial support during the writing and publishing process. I'll talk about that in a second. However, it's worth noting that advances must be earned out, meaning your book needs to sell enough copies to cover the advance before you start receiving additional royal payments. A higher advance can be a sign of confidence from the publisher, but it also sets a higher bar for sales before you see further earnings. I will say this caveat. If you to get an advance, let's say it's $3,000, $30,000, or $300,000, and I have a friend who got a $300,000 advance once. If you do not sell out or earn out that advance, that does not automatically disqualify you for a second book. Okay. And what that means is if they see good performance movement, meaning like the first 3 months, sales were like, boom, but you're new. So they're not expecting like Stephen King or Nora Roberts level sales. But there's a certain number they're looking for that says, if we put another book out and we put the right marketing into this is a good sign. Now, there are other variations where maybe you'll earn out, but it'll take you 2 years. And then, but like it's just a slow, couple hundred books here, a couple hundred books there. That might be worse for you, even if you did earn out. So, when getting an advance, if they offer a higher advance, it's okay if you don't earn that advance out, because if the sales are great in the beginning, first 3 to 6 months, there is a chance that you will get a second book, okay? Where they'll be like, let's see what we could do with a second book. So keep that in mind. Don't allow the advance amount to be scary. Now, obviously, if it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times down the road and you're still not earning out, that's where it becomes an issue. But the first or second time, when I was in the music industry, that was a big deal too with bands. They'd be like, we want to. I see it says you get 3 albums and then an option, and the reason is because, or sometimes it'd be 1 album with 3 options, and what that means is they don't have faith in you, but they think you have a good like hit. Like they're like, oh, we like this one song, so we'll sign you for an album because of this one song, but we don't know if you have another one in you, and sometimes that happens because you have a great song or a great book, but you don't have another good book, or you don't have another great song, and it is possible. But anyway, so the 1 album or the 1 book plus options, what that means is they take you on. If you do good enough sales, they don't have to be world-breaking sales. If you do good enough sales that shows movement or potential for growth, they'll take an option on the second. So then they'll either give you the second album, or in the case of an author, they'll go, let's do another book. All right. If that book does well, doesn't necessarily have to blow through the roof, but if it does well, and again, it shows movement and potential for growth, they'll take on that second option, okay, which is your third book or third album in case. All right. But the reason they do the options is because in case the first book doesn't do well or the first album doesn't do well, they don't have to sign you, but they want the option to be the first to sign that new book. All right. Additionally, advances, there are different ways to get paid. All right. Some ways are you can write a treatment for a book and have a pitch for the book. They sign you based on the treatment and the pitch, and then they pay you a third up front. And now you start writing the book. Then you hand in your first draft or your second draft or whatever. It'll be in the rules. It'll be in the contract. Once you hand in that next draft or whatever draft is considered the draft to get your second payment, you're good. And then once the book is finished, they'll give you a third payment. What does that mean? Well, if you get $5,000 divided by 3, it means you get $1,600, $1,666. Okay. First. But remember, 16. Do you have a manager? Well, if you have a manager, times 15%. You have to give that manager $250. So 166 minus $250. So now you're down to 1416. Okay. Do you have an agent? Well, the agent gets 10%. You can have both. All right. So, and that's 141. So now 1416. 1416 minus 141. Now you're down to 1275 for that first payment. Then you're saying, oh, that's not too bad. All right. So let's go back. So when I say 141 plus 250, so 390. So let's do that. 391, okay, is what's going to be taken out. But the thing is, right? That 1466, whatever, you have to take out the taxes first. So before your manager and agent get paid, taxes come out. So times, let's say 33% to be safe. $483. So 1416 minus $483. So, all right, here it goes. It's going to be 983 after taxes, okay, minus $391 for your other people. All right. So that leaves you with $592 for each payment. So times 3, you'll see $1,776 for a $5,000 advance. Okay. To put that in perspective, this is why you should be creating passive income. You should be creating multiple avenues of income. You shouldn't just be like, I just want to make money on my books. You should be like, well, how do I make money on writing? How do I am I available for other people to write for other people? Am I available to edit things? Am I available to read for other people? Am I available to whatever the case may be? In the beginning, it's going to be difficult to just be like, I'm going to make money off even a 10,000, because all you got to do is double that. So now you made 1184, 1184 for, and then how long does it take you to write the book? 3 months? That's not going to survive you, right? Okay. So you have to think beyond the advance. The advance is nice, but it is not going to afford you until you have earned the right to afford it. If you sell a book and the book does really well and it brings in so much money, yeah, you're going to get those royalties, but based on what you bring in, that's what your next advance will be based on. And it could be anywhere from 2 to 10% and sometimes 20% of the advance. So if you're bringing in, I don't know, $1 million in sales, they might say, oh, in the first 3 months, they brought in this many sales. That means there's a strong chance they're going to bring in 75% of those sales again. And then they think, all right, we believe in you, so we're going to give you. And that's how R.R. Martin was getting paid. He gets paid on the potential for those sales because of proof. So more proof you have, the better it is. And obviously, if you go to a publisher and you go, hey, I self-published my last book and I did these sales in this amount of time, they go, really? And that's a good indicator, too, of what's next. All right, let's talk about making the money, though. Royalties. Royalties are the percentage of sales revenue that you earn from each book sold. Typically, royalties start kicking in once your advance has been earned out. Royalties are important because they determine your long-term earnings from the book, especially if it sells well. And this is after even, like, let's say the publisher, God forbid, drops you. You'll still get royalties from that book. Royalty rates can vary, however, depending on whether the book is sold in hardcover, paperback, or as an ebook, which, by the way, are also rights. Okay, the right for a hardcover, the right for an ebook, right? Those are different. When negotiating, pay close attention to the royalty percentages offered and whether they increase based on sales milestones, basically a higher rate if the book sells over a certain number of copies. These are things you should be looking for when dealing with royalties. There are your straight standard royalties. There's your royalties on different mediums. Okay. The equivalent in the music industry is there's a royalty on the merchandise that your record label handles and sells. There's a licensing royalty. There's a sales royalty on CDs. There's a single. So if you release just one song and they just release, it's called a single. If you release that, there's a single royalty. There's all these different kind of royalties. In writing, there's the same thing. And you should be paying attention to that. So the format in which the book is will you have to make sure you get a royalty on all different formats. Hardcovers cost a little bit more to make, so sometimes the royalty might be lower or higher depending on what you negotiate. The milestone thing is very important. If they give you a low rate because you're a new quote unquote nobody, tell them get the numbers. Ask for numbers. You're allowed to do that. You could have your lawyer ask for numbers, whatever the case, because you shouldn't be going in there on your own. And then decide what the average sales are for an unknown author. And then say, hey, if I reach these sales or break the sale, can we increase the royalty? And that's not a hard ask, because if you're basing it on the average sales, maybe you might get in there. Royalties also, like even actors, like we get a royalty, right? So when you're writing a book, some authors, when they're unknown, like obviously Stephen King doesn't have to do this, but when you're starting out, some authors forget that they have to market themselves and brand themselves. So the more branding you do and the more awareness you bring to that brand and who you are, not just your books, but who you are and what you stand for, and you get out there and you do your interviews and you get as much press as possible. Your job is to build your name's value and draw. Louis C.K. sells out a venue because he's Louis C.K. and his name has draw. If Bob the shoemaker decided to do comedy one day, he's not going to get paid Louis C.K. money because there's no draw. So you as an author are starting out with no massive draw. So your job is to constantly be working to build that draw power. And the draw power will increase your royalties, not only what you get, but the continuation of those royalties. Because you're not trying to sell a book, you're trying to create an audience. And the audience creates backlog sales. So if you build your brand and you connect with people, and let's say, Stacy so-and-so is like, oh, I love this person. I love and I like their books. And then Stacy meets somebody, or Stacy has a child, or Stacy's cousin, or Stacy's whatever, has a conversation with them. They're like, oh, yeah, no, you got to check out this book. I mean, how did you find some of your favorite music? How did you find some of your favorite movies? How did you find some of your favorite books? How did you find your favorite artists? All these things come from the connection of others, the third-party introductions, and the word of mouth. So your job is always to expand your brand, your power, influence. It's not about book sales. It's about audience growth. And that doesn't come from books. A book doesn't sell itself. If it did, you could write the book, put it in your closet, and wait at the door for people to knock at the door. It's all about marketing and advertisement and building your brand. And if you focus all that attention on a book, then when you write the second book, you have to start over, because the audience has to start becoming familiar with the new design of the book, because it's going to be a new cover. They're going to have to get used to the new book. It's going to be a different book. It's not going to be the same exact words. You're going to change the words, maybe evolve the story, whatever the case may be. It's not identical. So if you focus on you as a brand, you will expand that brand's awareness and therefore build some draw power, and it'll increase your royalties, not only for the books you sell, but for the longevity of your books. Because again, Stacy likes your brand. They check out your book. They tell their cousins, their friends, their mothers, their fathers, or whatever. And now new people buy it. And then they'll read the new book and they go, wow, I really like this book. And then they realize you have older books, and they'll go back and buy the older books. And now you have sales. Okay. Subsidiary rights. Subsidiary rights. These rights refer to the rights to create derivative works based on your book, such as translations, audiobooks, film adaptations, and merchandising. I'll talk about that in a second. These rights can be incredibly valuable as they open up additional streams of income. Publishers may ask for some of these rights up front, but it's as in, like, they're like, can we have these before we even make them? Meaning, like, can we have the merchandising rights even though there's no merchandise yet? Publishers may ask for some of these rights, but it's often in the best interest of the author to negotiate retaining certain subsidiary rights, especially if you think your book has potential for adaptation. Retaining these rights allows you to negotiate separate deals for them, which can lead to higher earnings. George Lucas wanted to do Star Wars. The studio was like, "You're crazy. This is stupid." He said, "I'll tell you what. You don't have to pay me, but I want merchandising rights. I want 100% merchant rights." And they're like, "Yeah, sure, okay. You want to take them?" He paid for every single movie thereafter based on the money he earned on the merchandising rights. Merchandising is powerful. If you make a fantasy world, making characters like statuettes or toys or posters or something based on the artwork or the character descriptions, that's merchandising. Okay? That's extremely important and good money. You can retain those rights. When it comes to adaptation, R.R. Martin retained a lot of his rights to turn his books into film because he worked in the industry. He wrote on Beauty and the Beast with Ron Perlman and Linda Hamilton. So think about Jesus, this cat. Do you hear it? Think about what you give your rights away for and what you keep your rights for. Just because somebody publishes your book doesn't mean that they have to retain the rights for, say, the audiobook version, because you could go to a different publisher for that. If you look at famous authors, sometimes they have multiple publishing companies handling different deals. For me, when I was definitely working full time in the industry as far as like acting goes and stuff like that, I had a literary agent and I had an acting agent. I had two agents. Okay, one specifically did this and one specifically does that. So in publishing, it's the same thing. You could have a publisher doing this one thing and a publisher doing that one thing. So keep that in mind. All right. Negotiating tips. Let's see. Boop. Don't be afraid to negotiate the advance that's being offered. While the publisher may have a set budget, there is often room for negotiation on purpose. Do your research. Know what other authors in your genre are receiving as advances and use that as a reference point. If the advance is lower than expected, consider negotiating for better royalty rates or retaining more rights. Tip: if the publisher can't budget on the advance, ask for a portion of the payment upfront upon signing rather than waiting until later stages. Okay. Um, I will say this: when you're negotiating, the worst that can happen is they say no. They are not going to take the deal off the table because you said, "Can we talk about the advance?" It's just they're not going to be like, no. They're not going to strong arm you or hold you hostage. You have to take these crappy rates. By law, by law, you have to have at least the ability to discuss it. And this is why you get a lawyer involved. You have to take you out of the equation emotionally. This is why you have agents. The agent, like for example, in the film industry, if I got, like someone said, "I want you to act in my project," my job is to say, "I am interested, but you got to talk to my agent because they will negotiate without the emotion of me. I will not, if I'm there, I'm like, oh, I really want to do this. So I'm going to say yes to whatever they give me, even if I think, maybe I just want to do it because it's a good opportunity. It's a great role or whatever the case may be. Sometimes our dreams outweigh our logic. If somebody comes to you and says, look, I want to give you a publishing deal. I'm going to give you a $30,000 advance. $30,000 for a book, and then you realize it might be only like $8,000 each payment, but you're like $8,000, but that $8,000 has to hold you off for 3 to 4 months before you get your the next third. And you're like, wait, I pay $3,000 or $4,000 a month in bills. This might not cover me. But you're like, I'm going to be published. I want to get published. This is my dream. I'm going to be a published author. Right? But an agent deals with these people all the time. All the time. And it's in your best interest to know how to negotiate, to do your research, and ultimately stand firm. However, you should know what your wiggle room is. That's why the old saying is like, yeah, I need $50. Meanwhile, you only need 40. I need $50 an hour. I can only give you 45. 47. I'm like, no, I 46. And you're like, you know what? All right, I'll take it. But meanwhile, it's $6 more than you needed because you started high. Always start high. All right. push for better royalty rates. Royalty rates can vary, but high royalty rates means more income in the long run. It's reasonable to ask for higher rates, especially if you believe your book has significant sales potential. Many contracts offer escalator clauses, which means increasing your royalty percentage once a certain number of books are sold. Look for these clauses and try to negotiate them in your favor. Tip: ask if the publisher is open to increasing royalty percentages based on sales milestones, such as moving from 10% to 12% after the first 10,000 copies are sold. Also, there's like a print run. So, like, you can be like, after the print run, if the print run sells out by this date, can we do this? Or can I get another whatever? Okay. So, do your research, learn what the average is because the internet exists. But ask agents, especially if you have an agent, ask managers, especially if you have a manager. You could talk to lawyers. You're allowed to talk to lawyers without paying them, by the way. They'll answer some questions if you're respectful about it. But the idea is that you need to have your army and your tools, and you need to do your due diligence. Okay. Retain subsidiary rights where possible. Subsidiary rights such as translation. That means, like, your book is English. If you want to sell it in Italiano, that's a new right. But so is film, and so is audiobooks, and all these other things. So publishers often want all the rights, but you may benefit from retaining them. If the publisher insists, try to negotiate a higher share of the income from these rights, or a reservation clause that gives you back those rights after a certain point, or a reversion. So after a certain amount of time, like 5 years, 10 years, you get your rights back. Tip: if you think your book could be adapted into another format, negotiate for a higher percentage. Basically, what that means is, if you think your book is going to turn into a film or television show, you say, look, you want the rights to that, but I want this royalty rate. I want this kind of return on that investment. Okay. What is the benefit of giving them the rights? Sometimes if a publisher has the rights to something, they're going to push to make that happen. So if you really want it to become a film or a TV show and they have the rights, they're more likely there to help you. If you don't give them the rights, you'll have to do the pushing yourself. All right. So basically, what's going on is give yourself a time limit. Okay. This clause allows you to regain the rights to your book. You want to make sure this clause exists. So when you're negotiating, make sure you have a time frame, a very specific time frame, a plausible time frame. You might even say, hey, listen, if you guarantee me 2 books or 3 books, then I'll if every book is 10 years, whatever, you could have the rights to these 2 books for the length of my 3-book deal. So if I'm going to write the first book and it's already done, my second book will be done by next year, and my third book will be done maybe 2 years from there. So that's 4 or 5, let's say 5 years. So what's 10 years after that? So you go 15 years, you could have the first book, whatever it is, 12 years for the second book and 10 years for the third book. And that means that they would have the rights to your book for the extended time of all 3 of your books. And now they're like, maybe we could talk. The most important negotiating tip: be willing to walk away. One of the most important things is you having the power. Things don't control you. You control them. So if the terms don't feel right or the publisher is unwilling to negotiate key points, it's okay to say, hasta luego, auf Wiedersehen, ciao, au revoir. Bye. It's better to hold out for a deal that respects your work and rewards your effort than to sign something you regret. Now, I will say, tip: remember, you are not the king of France. Know your boundaries, but make sure they're reasonable. If they're like, look, we're going to give you 10% on royalties, and you're like, no, I need 30%. One of you is talking out your kookiness. Final thoughts. This is a quick one. Publishing contracts might seem intimidating at first, but knowledge is power. Understanding advances, royalties, and your rights as an author puts you in a position to protect your work and ensure you're fairly compensated. This is your creative effort, and it's worth advocating for, not just for peace of mind, but for the foundation of your career's longevity. Don't be afraid to ask questions, seek advice, and I recommend you do, and negotiate for a deal that represents and respects your talent and hard work. The reality of publishing, or I should say the reality of the publishing industry, is that the traditional contracts are just one avenue to get your book out there in the world. There are a plethora of other options: self publishing, small presses, hybrid models that may align better with your goals and give you more control. It's not always about having that traditional publishing contract. It's about having a career that works best for your peace and happiness in this life. Whether that path you whatever path you choose, make sure it's one that allows you to thrive both creatively and professionally. With that said, the right information can turn what feels like an overwhelming process into an empowering step. So, when I was in the music industry, every band wanted a record deal, but they didn't understand what that truly meant. Like with authors, your book is just a byproduct to you as a brand, and you have to think about how you want your career to benefit from the sales of that byproduct in the long run. What does that mean? It means that, like with some of those bands, they had a one and done contract for an album because it didn't make the money back. It means the marketing and tour support they were going to get never came. It means that what we think we know about the business isn't always the business itself. It's our job to do the research when figuring out what works best for us and our longevity. The publisher isn't going to always make it so you can focus solely on your writing just because you got a contract with them. This is a business and you're a career, and your career is a business. Let me say that again. This is a business and your career is a business. The ultimate goal is to build a sustainable career that allows you to continue writing and sharing your stories. And how do we do that? Real quick, not every publishing deal is going to market your book, but you, even with a marketing deal, must always be building your brand. Focus on network market practice. You got to build and cultivate relationships to establish a strong circle of influence. A circle of influence does not influence your career, they influence better habits and help you think outside the box. Your marketing has to be about designing a brand to build awareness, which creates interest and ultimately generates sales so people buy into your message emotionally. This leads to sales. But the closer they are to you emotionally, the more willing they are to follow you, because 1,000 true fans wanting to support you and buying a shirt where you get $4 for it is $4,000 a shirt. If your book makes you $5, that's $5,000 if each of those fans buy one book. And then, of course, practicing is all about your strengths and weaknesses, understanding what you're good at and bad at, and then putting the time in to better your weaknesses to become strengths, and then take your strengths and become useful items that you could utilize to enhance your career. They also help you develop your talents in the sense that you can join the tables of those circles of influence, and now you can best lead, follow, and advise that specific table, not for your personal growth, but for the growth of that table's mission. And then people see that when you are involved, when your name is associated with something, it elevates because you help it and you don't allow it to help you, even though you are being rewarded because your greatness is based on your elevation of other things. That is how you will find success in this industry, and how a publishing deal would not necessarily grant you that. So even though you get a publishing deal, you still have to put the work on to network market practice and develop yourself as a career. That's some business advice for you. Next video in the series, we're going to talk about the role of literary agents. We're going to explore the benefits of working with a literary agent, how to find one, and what to expect from the agent-author relationship. Question. What's one thing you wish you knew before you started in this industry that you, learned over time, where you're like, man, if I only knew that when I started, I think it would have changed the trajectory of my career. Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's help each other navigate this world. Okay, all right. Okay. If you haven't done so already and you're liking what you see, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. And with that said, keep developing. All right, mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.